a summer Thursday edition of Birds 365. Mac with, oh, look who it is. Jeff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com. Been a month. How you been, Mosh?
Yeah, I've been good. How you guys been doing?
Doing well. Good to see you, Mosh. I think you popped in after Jody and I were talking about it, but we were talking about Matt Patricia, and to me, it's kind of I don't want to say strange, but it's kind of a ballsy hire. Let's say that because of his relationship with his prior relationship with Darius Slay. Plus, you have a young defensive coordinator, and all of a sudden, sitting on his shoulder is this accomplished Bill Belichick guy who's done it all in this industry. With even though he wasn't a success in Detroit as a head coach, heck of a defensive coordinator. Couple questions for you. I know you and Adam are plugged in when it comes to coaching positions around the league. I haven't gotten a chance to ask Nick yet what the relationship was. How did this come about? Do you guys have any intel on that? And then the second part is just the new, and this is kind of a new layer to the coaching staff, not just Matt, but Marcus Brady on the offensive side, with young coordinators. Do you like that philosophy to have that veteran sort of stewardship as senior assistants?
Yeah, John, I like having good coaches on my staff. If I'm a head coach or if I'm running a franchise, the one thing I want to avoid, which the Eagles could not avoid 3 years ago, was a situation where you have too many chefs spoiling a brew. And that was, back when Jeffrey Lurie and Howie felt like the offensive staff needed a lot of changes. Carson had been playing well. And then next thing you look up and you got Doug and Press Taylor and Marty Morningweg and Rich Scangarello and Andrew Briner. And, all of them are supposed to add X to the offense or Y to the offense and Z, but it felt like the offense did not look good in that case. And you never really knew who was responsible for what and, how that flow of ideas was going in the meeting rooms. But you knew that the product on the field wasn't good. So in this case, I think – so let's go back to the Patricia thing. That might have been a Sean Desai inspired hire, and more so than a Nick Sirianni one, because back at the Combine, I remember being there. Okay, so at the Combine is basically where they finalized the contract with Sean Desai. And I remember running into some people who knew Sean and said that he already had some people in mind to be a senior assistant, because Sean had only been coordinator for 1 year. He's still a fairly young guy. One of those guys was Mike Pettin. All right. And the other name that I had heard was Matt Patricia. I only went with Pettin on Twitter because I had more than one person be able to confirm that for me. But I had heard Patricia, and then it kind of went away for a little while, and then all of a sudden came back a little while later, and they wind up bringing him in. I forget where the connection is. I'm not 100% sure. Have to go back, re-look into that. But I know he was sort of on the radar as soon as Sean Desai became, finalized defensive coordinator.
Now, when you say the Desai hire, are you suggesting that Desai was told we're going to try and bring in a veteran guy or it was Desai's idea and he was saying to Howie, listen, I'd like to have a veteran guy as my go-to bounce ideas off kind of thing? Whose overall idea was it that the need for this position had to be filled?
Yeah, the way I understand it, just from talking to people who knew Desai, was that these were Desai's guys. These were names that he had as far as people he wanted to bring onto the staff.
Interesting. That would make
there was definitely a connection with Pettin between him. I think in Chicago, right? Wasn't Pettin there at one point?
I believe he was. He's doing this tour of the NFC North.
Right. I'm not 100% sure where the connection between him and Patricia was, but I remember looking at some kind of maybe they both knew somebody and had known each other. But it was.
Well, now that you say that, my guess would be Sean was at Boston College when Matt was in New England.
I think that's where the connection was. So Yeah. So that was Jody, to answer your question. As I understood it, that was his preferences.
Was Desai. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Well done. We solved one mystery, and that's because I couldn't put it two together. And I heard there was a relationship. I was thinking Nick, and I'm like, well, where was their relationship? And but Sean, would make more sense. DC, New England, thick as thieves. Look at Temple. Look at the coaching staff. Look at all the Temple guys
Of course.
now here with the Eagles. So it is interesting, but I do give Nick Sirianni credit from this, man. When I first wrote about Matt Patricia coming here, Geoff, I said, this kind of shows Nick's comfortable in his own skin because this, as I said, it's kind of a ballsy move. Slay was not shy about saying, you don't like this guy. And that's a team captain, veteran player, one of your best players. And he was like, hey, you don't got to like the people you work with, but you got to be professionals. From that standpoint, I think it's a positive for Nick Sirianni. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, no, I think it's a positive in two ways. One, it shows what you just said, the comfort in his own skin. But I also think it shows you the respect that the players have for Nick, especially Darius Slay, because Nick did say he talked to Slay about it before making the hire. And I don't know, Nick didn't really say, I have Slay's blessing, but he basically said we had a conversation about it and it's all good. So I think that if you're a head coach who doesn't have your finger on the pulse of the locker room or the respect of the players, I think that kind of move doesn't go over well. And maybe Slay doesn't, okay it or sign off, or you have issues there. And, maybe issues could arise from this. So it's a little risky, but if anything, someone asked me like, who has to be the bigger man here? And it's got to be Matt Patricia. You have to come into this organization and say, I was wrong about Slay. I said he was no good and not as good as Talib. And this guy's been to the Pro Bowl 4 times since I pissed him off. So I got to come in here and sort of find my way and stay behind the scenes and do my job and not try to big time everybody like I acted when I was in Detroit.
Most 'tis the season to put together lists. Everybody's got lists at every single position and grouping and everything.
Yeah, I need milk, eggs, out of fruit.
That's a honey-do list for you for later on this afternoon. I can tell.
Milk and eggs is 1 and 1A.
Always.
Yeah.
Ross Tucker, our buddy, does Eagle pregame show, WIP as well. Came up with a list of the coaches in the National Football League, and Sirianni made it in at number 5. I don't want to talk him down. 2 years. I know he's the only coach in the NFL who's got 1,000% making the playoffs as a head coach, 2 for 2. And he went to the Super Bowl, was tied with 10 seconds to go. Has he climbed up that high that fast? Is he the 5th best coach in the NFL?
Well, I think the lack of longevity there really does become a little bit of an issue, only because, we could have all put Doug Peterson in the top 5 after his first 2 years, even though he, made the playoffs once, but then wins the Super Bowl year 2. And he was looking like a guy who was on that trajectory to be a great head coach. And then he had a kind of precipitous fall. So,
I think he's on that trajectory again, though.
Yeah, he might be right back up there.
Yeah.
I mean, and cracking the top 5 is pretty tough because you've got your John Harbaughs, you got your Mike Tomlins, you obviously have your Andy Reid, Bill Belichick. That's 4 right there.
Pete Carroll.
Pete Carroll 5. I think Sean McDermott, he hasn't been to a Super Bowl, but he basically took a Bills team that was a joke for 15 years and has them annually in the playoffs. So that's pretty good. So I'm trying to think who else. God, there have been so many new coaches.
There's a lot. Well, there's always a lot of recency bias with, Nick's been great. Nick's coming off a Super Bowl. But, I look at, you brought up Mike Tomlin. The guy's never had a losing season.
Never. Right. And last year, when they were about 5 games under 500 at one point, everybody's like, oh, this will be the year. And then they still wound up not finishing under 500. Yeah.
So I think there's something to longevity. I think Nick's on his way, but to Nick's credit, and he's not the first coach to say this, but he does say, show me a good coach and I'll show you a bunch of good players. The Eagles have some good players. We talked about Doug Peterson. he's back on the trajectory. Well, now he's got Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
Even Press Taylor, you were bringing up, that sort of cluster, with Press and Rick Scangarella and Andrew Bronner. Good poll, by the way, to get Andrew Bronner in there.
Thank you.
I think the Eagles were, to be honest, very unfair when Press Taylor was leaving. There was a lot of insults that probably weren't deserved. And all of a sudden, that guy's a good year for being a head coaching candidate. If Jacksonville goes nuts and Trevor Lawrence turns in, and I think we all think he's got, now the AFC is much tougher because there's a lot of good quarterbacks, but he's got a chance to be a really good player. And if he turns into what we think he's going to turn into, Press Taylor's going to be a head coach in this league. I almost guarantee it.
Yeah, that was an odd situation, John, because the way everything fell apart, it wasn't that people, as I understood it, didn't think Press Taylor was a good coach. It was that they felt he and Carson had developed too close of a relationship through family, religion, whatever you want to say, for one to be a fair and objective coach of another. But I think that there was that missing part of, well, will Carson allow himself to be coached by anybody at that point? That was missing in the equation. And look, Doug, I applaud Doug for that. He planted his flag in the ground. He met with Jeffrey Lurie after the year. They said they were going to meet again in a few days. The message was sent basically to Doug: when we meet again, you better have a better plan involving your coaching staff. And Doug met with him 5 days later, whatever, in Florida, and said, no, this is my plan. You don't like it, you can go the other way. And Jeffrey Lurie went the other way. And I remember saying to Adam on the podcast, because I felt like it was just a bad overall thing for the entire franchise, not a good look. But I said, we're really not going to know whether the fallout from this is good for both, bad for both, good for one. We won't find a winner or a loser for another 3 to 4 years down the road, because obviously Doug has to have another shot to coach and bring his people in and see what happens. And then Jeffrey's got to get a chance to move on and see if he can clean up the mess. And lo and behold, Jeffrey cleaned it up pretty quickly, and Doug looks like he's about to clean up or repair his image and clean up the old Jacksonville mess. So I guess it wound up being a win-win in the end. It's just an odd situation.
Yeah. Here's something that, damn it, just dawned on me, and I can't believe I never put this 2 and 2 together, but just listening to you two guys talk, why isn't Carson Wentz the Jacksonville backup as of right now? They got C.J. Beathard. Everybody's got their backup. The Eagles went out and got Mariota. He's a little bit more like Carson, the Jalen Hurts than Gardner Minshew was. Everybody makes their moves with guys who have been somewhere else before, shown a level of competence. I've never been a C.J. Beathard fan, to be truthful with you. I don't think he's even a backup. Forget about a starter, and sometimes backups have to step in and be starters for a game, 2 games, 3 games, 4 games. The longer you get, the more your season's screwed. If Press Taylor had that good a relationship with Carson Wentz, why isn't he the backup in Jacksonville right now?
That's a good question. Why isn't he a backup anywhere right now? I mean, you'd have to know what he's looking for.
There are some teams that have better situations. They got better 2 quarterbacks than Carson Wentz. Sorry, Carson fans. There's a whole bunch of teams like that fit in the National Football League. Jacksonville's not one of them. If you, like me, don't like C.J. Beathard, and those teams don't have Press Taylor as their offensive coordinator.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I would say, the season's, just like why don't the Eagles have a better linebacker? Well, the season doesn't really start for another 3 or 4 months, so we'll see.
Well, I mean, that's a role. You have to support the starter, especially in
the optics could look bad there.
Yeah, especially a starter like Trevor Lawrence. Remember, Gardner Minshew, they got rid of Gardner Minshew not because he was a bad backup quarterback, because he's saying, I want to compete. Right. I don't believe in he didn't take a shit because he doesn't believe in number 2s. That great quote of Gardner Minshew. They're like, all right, see you, Gardner. You're not going to be the number 1 quarterback. We just took Trevor Lawrence number 1 overall. You got to accept that role. I'm not sure anybody thinks there was a CFL quarterback. It was a great story. I forget his name. Oh, man. Anyway, Minnesota was going to bring him in to be the backup to Kirk Cousins. He's like, I'm going to come in and compete. And they're like, dude, we want you to be the backup. We want you. And they're like, all right, no, go back to the CFL.
It's like
Bo Levi Mitchell. Bo Levi Mitchell. Yeah, exactly. And he never got to the NFL, and that's probably the reason. You have to. Jody, I talk about roles all the time as third receiver versus starting receiver. You have to be a utility player. You have to support someone else. Carson Wentz going to do that for Trevor Lawrence? I wouldn't go near that. I think Press Taylor's smart enough to know that, even though they are close. Geoff is right. That was a big deal. They were probably – because remember, Press started out as the assistant quarterback's coach, and John DiPilippo was the hard ass who was on. And by the way, he was on Carson all the time. And that's when Carson improved his mechanics and all that stuff. And then John left, and it sort of went downhill.
Right.
So that was probably fair of the Eagles to say, look, you guys are too close. But it's hard to change that role when it started out. Like I'm the good cop to John DiPilippo's bad cop, and then you got to be the good cop.
Yeah,
that's more difficult to do.
All right, so let me ask both you guys, because you know better than me, because you're there in the locker room. You got a chance to talk to him. I didn't. Let's just do the Carson Wentz tracking thing. He goes from being the massive big buck quarterback, had them on the precipice of the Super Bowl. Oops, gets hurt. Nick Foles comes in, finish the deal. All right, next year he's the starting quarterback. Nick Foles still here. He gets hurt again. All right, Nick Foles gets out of Dodge. He comes back. He's a starting quarterback. He gets hurt in the playoff game. The next year, change of coach, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't like the fact that he stinks and has a terrible year, and the Eagles had offensive line issues, and he gets – I don't want to play anymore. Here goes Jalen Hurts playing the last couple of games. Boom, he forces his hand. He gets traded out of town. He goes to the Colts, had the season that he had. It was so good that they dumped him for much less a year after than what they paid for him. He has the year that he has in Washington. They say, see you later, bye. And now he's been sitting out there for months. Are you telling me Carson Wentz's personality isn't going to allow him to go, you're a backup, big guy. This is your wanted life now. If you want to be in the National Football League, you must come in and go, I'm perfectly fine working behind, helping out any way I can, even if I never step foot on the field. Trevor Lawrence take another step. Are you suggesting he's so narrow focused, his mindset is so I'm that good a quarterback that he can't accept that?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, it's been a long time since I've talked to Carson. I don't know what's going through his head. After last year ended, I remember thinking to myself, it wouldn't shock me if he was done. Like, he's taken so many injuries. He's lost his job so many times. Every time he loses his job, somebody seems to do better. And, he's made a lot of money, likes to, do his own thing, hunt, fish, got his wife and kids. I wouldn't have shocked me if he was done. It was only recently.
I know you haven't missed it. John Gruden putting a quality time in with Carson.
He's out working
sound like
with
a guy
John.
who's ready to pack it into me.
Wait, I missed this. What, he's working out with John Gruden?
Down in Florida. He's got John Gruden.
They're both trying.
They're both trying to reclamation. They're trying to reclamate each other. A bunch of guys are working out down there. Carson's one of them, which I think is a good sign.
Sure.
What part of the problem is, he went out to work with Tom House and company before the 2017 season. He had that great spike, and then he stopped doing it.
Yeah.
And, the mechanics started falling back. I think that was part of the issue. And then, my Bo Levi Mitchell comparison. Yeah, I was looking him up. 2-time Grey Cup champion, 2-time CFL MVP. Big fish in small pond, couldn't accept a different role. Carson was a big fish in a big pond.
Yeah.
You got to knock yourself down. But now that we've gone down this route, which is kind of a wormhole, I appreciate it, Geoff.
That's Jody, not me.
The backup quarterback situation is interesting this year because you have a guy with a ton of experience in Marcus Mariota, ton of starting experience, plays a similar style to Jalen Hurts, so I guess that's a positive. Do you think they've upgraded at backup quarterback with Marcus Mariota?
No.
Oh, I got to know.
No, I don't think they have.
Mhm.
And I can be on an island, and I'm not criticizing the decision. You needed a backup quarterback. He does fit the offense. It's interesting because as soon as the signing was made, I said, I'm not sure that this is, based on just my own eyes of watching the Atlanta Falcons last year and watching him play quarterback, and then speaking to some personnel people after the signing was made, I'm not sure he can play anymore all that well. Maybe a new offense and better weapons around him help, but I'm telling you, go watch the Falcons last year. It's not like he was under siege every play. They have a decent offensive.
They have a good offensive line. They got better.
He was missing Kyle Pitts before Kyle Pitts got hurt by yards. I mean, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn at times, and I don't know why or what happened. I mean, he was never a very accurate quarterback in the NFL to begin with. The one thing you could say about Minshew, he's a gamer. Did he throw a few picks? Yeah, and that cost him. Yeah, but it's not like he was throwing it right to the opponent. I mean, Deron Bland had a jump in front of one of those against Dallas, one of those 2 picks. I mean, he won the game against the Jets 2 years ago. He knew the offense, and it's crazy. We had Jason Avant on our podcast last week. Adam and I did, and I thought he was going to applaud the signing, and he said the same thing I did. He actually thinks it's better when you have a backup who has a different skill set than your starter. He said, I know conventional wisdom is you want the same skill set so you don't have to change the offense. He's like, good coaches don't really have to change an offense if you have a good quarterback anyway. You've got your weapons. You do what you do. You just want the best player you can to help you win games. I'm not sure Marcus Mariota is the best backup quarterback to help them win a game or two if Jalen Hurts gets hurt.
Couple of things. Number one, he did kind of throw the ball to Mark Lattimore down by the goal line against the Saints. Did Gardner Minshew.
He did. That was
that was kind of costly. And
Yes.
I'll go way out on a limb and tell you, no matter how bad Marcus Mariota played in Atlanta last year, if he's got to start 2 games this year, he's not going 0-2 with this talent. And Gardner did go 0-2 last year. And I know it wasn't all Gardner's fault. And Dak Prescott put up a whole bunch of points down there in Dallas.
I'll happily disagree with your confidence on that. I don't know what you've seen out of Marcus Mariota that would make you say that he would definitely win 2 games. Are these 2 games against the Buffalo, Kansas City, San Francisco, Dallas, Seattle stretch?
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Dallas was
win.
a playoff game. New Orleans was not. So if you can find me 2 games in the Eagles schedule where one's a playoff team from the previous year, one's not a playoff team, I'll tell you.
And that's the thing, I thought Gardner played well against Dallas. Quez Watkins kind of let him down.
Right.
He played poorly against the Saints. If he played against the Saints like he played against Dallas, they win that game easily, but he had a crappy game.
Right.
But
so 3 starts, he played well. He played good, especially for a backup quarterback in 2 of them, and he played poorly in 1, which is what you're going to get from a backup quarterback. And, can Marcus Mariota do that? I don't know. If you took the number 1 pick out of his resume and just looked at what he's done as a quarterback in this league, are you really that impressed?
I'll give you the 2 games.
I think he's a good backup because he's got a ton of it. That's what I'd look for in it. I want somebody who's not going to crumble. And he's got a ton of experience. He's not going to be overwhelmed by the stage. You're not going to have great players as backup quarterbacks. There's not even 32, let's be honest.
Right.
So I thought Gardner was a good backup, and I think Marcus is a good backup. It's interesting. Who's better? I'm more to, and I know Jody thinks Marcus is. I'm more leaning in your camp, Geoff. I could be swayed. But I thought Gardner was a good backup. In the Jets game, everyone said at the time, well, it's just the Jets. And Jody knows that as a Jets fan. It's just the Jets. They played well.
Did you make sure you say the Jets of 2021?
Yes. Not
the Jets of 2023. It's going to be another story.
Yeah. We think. Hopefully for Joe Douglas. I like Joe a lot. But I think the Jets are going to be a good team. And, who knows? Gardner Minshew might get a month or so out in Indianapolis as a starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Is he top 32 in the world? He's on the cusp, Gardner Minshew. So I don't know if they upgraded there. I'm with you, Geoff.
I'll give you the 2 games that would be a comp from last year. At Washington, home Dallas, weeks 8 and 9. One team made the playoffs, one team didn't. Shoot, the team that didn't beat the Eagles last year. That would be Washington in Philadelphia. As a matter of fact, this one we at Washington, home Dallas. Yeah, I'm telling you, Marcus Mariota wins one of those two games, if not both. And, oh, by the way, if you said you can't go 1-1, which do you think is more likely, 0-2 or 2-0? I say 2-0.
And all I would say is why? Why would you think that? What has Marcus Mariota done to make you think that?
I think the Eagles are that good.
Oh, well, then that's different. Okay. All right, that I can understand. That you just think the supporting cast is so good. But eventually, all those great wide receivers, the ball's got to be put in their hands. That's all I'm saying.
Understood.
That's true. You need a vehicle to get receivers the football. And they do have a ton of talent. We were talking. I think CBS put out their top 100 players, and they had 9. Jody informs me. I think it should have been 11 or 12, to be honest. This team is top heavy with talent, but there are some issues, Jeb. And I keep looking at linebacker, and I keep saying, have they gone too far? I agree with them for the most part. Devalued position. I'm not spending Chicago money at all-ball linebacker. I agree with all that, but I think they've taken it too far. I think they're.
I thought that 2 years ago when they went into the year with Eric Wilson and Alex Singleton,
and you were right.
Something like
that.
Well,
Alex is a pretty good player,
or even before that. Well, Alex was, but the point is, he was good, but not in the scheme that they were about to run. And then even the year before that, it was like Nate Gary and Alex Singleton, right?
Yeah.
So at least Nakobe Dean's a draft pick, a high draft, top third round draft pick, although he hasn't played. But yeah, I mean, there's no depth, right? I mean, Nick Morrow is right now your starter, and if one of those two guys gets hurt, then.
But here's the thing, not that this is everything, but they gave Justin Evans $600,000. They gave Olamide Zaccheaus $600,000. They gave Nick Morrow nothing, Jeff.
And he signed for it. That's the crazy thing, right?
Yeah. Nothing. And they're saying, oh, this is a starting linebacker. How is that possible?
I laugh about it on the podcast all the time. The guy signed so early, too. If you're not going to get any guaranteed money, don't you just at least go a couple of weeks into free agency just to see?
All right, I've been beating this drum for a while, but we haven't had you on, so I might not have run this by you, Mosher. I need your take on this.
Mm-hmm.
I think all three of us agree they could use an upgrade at the other linebacker spot. Nakobe Dean's going to do what Nakobe Dean's going to do. He's going to get the dot in his helmet. He's going to be the leader of the defense. He flashed in the 30-some-odd snaps he took last year. That's another bone of contention with me. How did he only play 30-some-odd snaps last year? But it is what it is, and we are where we are now. If Nicholas Morrow is not the answer, and despite Christian Ellis looking great 7-on-7 in their activities this spring, the Eagles come to the determination we got to upgrade at that position. I'm a big Patrick Queen guy. The Ravens didn't pick up his fifth-year option. They drafted a linebacker in the second round who can certainly step in and take his place. John and I disagree on what the compensation would be for a guy like Patrick Queen. I think he merits a third-round pick in exchange. That's what I think you're going to have to pay to get him, or the equivalency of a third-round pick. Darren Waller was traded during this offseason. 1 year had a phenomenal year, and then last year came back to the pack, off injured and the like, and the Giants were willing to give a third-round pick for Darren Waller. So I think that's the number. John says he's not going past day 3, that he's drawn the line there. He's not going to get to day 2. I'd be willing to do a third-round pick for a guy as good as Patrick Queen. If you can't get him signed, then he could be a potential compensatory pick. So it's not really paying a 3 if you're going to get a compensatory pick after the fact if you let him walk away. Would you give up a third-round pick for Patrick Queen to upgrade the Eagles linebacker position if you're the Eagles?
I don't know that I would give a third rounder. If he's that good, why are they not extending him? Would be my first question. Probably would go a 4 and a 6, something like that. I don't know if I give up a third rounder for him. I haven't watched enough Patrick Queen. I know what his pedigree was. I know he's great at LSU. I know he was a second round pick for the Ravens.
Right.
Um,
And he wasn't great his rookie year, but he's gotten better each of his 3 years in the league.
Yeah. Like 28 overall.
My thought process, if the Ravens don't feel like he's good enough for an extension, then there's probably problematic there. And I don't know if I want to give up a third for it. But
yeah, but see, that could be a Lamar thing. That's a whole.
Well, it's also they paid Roquan, so you can't pay two players at that position.
Right.
But there's a couple things, and first of all, Baltimore thinks they're a contender. I don't necessarily agree with them, but they think they're a contender. They think they might have the best linebacking group in the NFL. Why not play it out if you think you're a contender? But from the Eagles' standpoint, here's my theory, Mosh. They're not paying him. I mean, he wants to be paid like a top tier linebacker. Right. So it's a rent player. It's a rent player to begin with.
Right.
And he probably wants an extension. So if he's moving, he probably wants an extension. Yep. I just don't see the fit. And the Eagles proved it with TJ Edwards. Now he doesn't have the pedigree. But if you would have told me before free agency started, all right, $7 million. Get you TJ Edwards back. I would have said, all right, I'm doing that. Let's be done. What TJ Edwards, Nakobe Dean, bang, let's go. Let's go to the Super Bowl. They said, nope, too much.
Crazy, right?
That's you're not paying Patrick Queen anywhere near $7 million this year.
No.
So in the fourth year of a rookie deal, it's like $1 million and change against the cap.
I'm not giving up a third round pick.
He's not happy. He's not happy without the extension. Patrick Queen's not happy without the extension. And they're not paying him down the road. So if he plays well, they're not paying him. If he plays poorly, they don't want to pay him. Either way, he's not going to be here, so he's a rent player. That's my only point.
Right.
And they did okay this past year with 2 rental linebackers. They let Edwards walk out the door. They let Kaiser walk right out the door. Why would I shy away from having Patrick Queen as a rental?
Well, he's a higher profile player. And TJ was here. So TJ's a different category. TJ's just on an expiring deal. Now, Kaiser, they brought in, prove a deal. He wasn't a great player. Patrick Queen's a former first-round pick. He wants the 50-year option. He wants a big-time expansion. He wants $10 million a year. You have a different mentality. It's what I was talking about with Bo Levi Mitchell. You got to have a mentality. He's going to come in as a rental player. He's not going to be happy. The Eagles aren't going to pay him. Again, we can talk about who the free agents are going to be next year, who they're not going to be. There's no guarantee you're getting a compensatory pick. But if he plays well and he hits a home run, you acquire him, hits a home run, and he's getting $10 million a year somewhere else, you're back in the same boat. It doesn't. No,
let's trot Nicholas Morrow out there all year.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't agree with that. There's a happy medium.
Yeah,
there's a happy medium, and the happy medium is already in the rearview mirror. Pay TJ Edwards goddamn $7 million. He earned it.
That ship is sailed, Johnny Mac. You know it. I know it. Mosher knows it. He's gone. We both wanted to see him keep Edwards. It's done.
I do think the next Eagles starting linebacker opposite Dean is probably on another team's roster.
Yeah, it's probably not here.
And he's probably on the way out of that team by the end of camp. They'll flip a 5 or a 6 for him, where they'll just sign him after he gets waived.
It's going to be a CJ level trade, and hopefully it works out as well as CJ. But what they give up for CJ? A 4 and a 6. Is that what you threw?
And
it's going to be
that. They got 7 back, so it was a 2 for 2, but they gave up 2 higher picks.
It's going to be that level of trade. Right. I agree, and it'll probably be mid camp to late camp.
Oh, I'll bet you that guy doesn't come in and play as well as CJ Gardner-Johnson did. That's one bet I will make.
That probably is not going to happen.
That probably won't be on the field as much either. We'll see if Sean Desai plays a lot more dime or big nickel with just one linebacker.
Yeah, I think there's going to be big nickel. We got to go at Geoff P. Mosher. You got the P in there? Is that new?
I decided to switch it up when my blue check mark got taken away. So
the blue that was a devastating day.
No blue check mark, but add a P. We like it. What's P stand for?
My middle name, Paul.
Paul. Well, that's why.
Oh yeah, it used to be Jeff Mosher NFL, right?
Right.
I'm used to saying that all the time. So
I was
Jeff,
about to get fresh with you for a second there, Jody, but I decided to keep it clean.
I promise not to call you Paul if you promise not to call me Aloysius. Yeah, my confirmation name is
Really? You know who else has that middle name?
What's that?
A New Yorker like you should know. Patrick Aloysius Ewing.
Ewing, correct.
Oh, there
yeah,
we go. There we
That's
go.
right.
Nice. That's two good polls. Patrick Aloysius Ewing and Andrew Briner. Two good polls from Jeff Mosher this morning. InsideTheBirds.com. Inside the Birds podcast. Download it where you get your favorite podcasts. He and Adam Kaplan. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Have a great one.
Thanks, Moshe. That's what I call him more than anything, more than Paul, more than Geoff. He's Moshe, and he's great whenever he comes out with us. All right, McMullen McDonald coming back to put a ball on the show.